There is a quiet tragedy that lives inside the empath, the kind of tragedy that doesn't scream, doesn't rage, doesn't destroy. It just feels, and in feeling, it mistakes pain for love, chaos for chemistry, and trauma for connection. You see, the empath doesn't fall for people, they fall for potential. They fall for what they sense, not what they see. They fall for the fragments, the wounded child behind the anger, the longing behind the manipulation, the sorrow behind the cruelty. They fall in love with ghosts and then call it destiny. Carl Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And this is how the empath lives before awakening, repeating the same emotional patterns under the illusion of divine connection. They believe the intensity means it's special. They believe the chaos means it's real. They believe the pain means it's proof of love. But pain is not proof. It is programming. The empath was not born this way, they were trained. Trained by childhoods where love came mixed with fear, where approval was conditional, where affection was something to be earned, not received. They learned early that safety meant reading the room before they spoke, regulating everyone else's emotions before tending to their own. They became hyper-attuned, not because they were gifted, but because they had to be. This is the origin of their power and their curse. They learned to survive by feeling everything, and now, as adults, they call it empathy. But beneath that empathy lies exhaustion. Because every time they meet someone who feels familiar, they call it love, not realizing its recognition. Not soul recognition, wound recognition. The nervous system remembers what the mind forgets. And when an empath meets someone whose energy vibrates at the same frequency as their original pain, it feels like home. Not because it's safe, but because it's known. That is the cruel paradox of trauma. It makes the familiar feel fated. It convinces the empath that this time, loving the same pattern will heal it. That this time, their understanding will change the outcome. That this time, their empathy will be enough. But trauma does not dissolve through repetition. It dissolves through awareness. And awareness cannot coexist with illusion. You see, when the empath confuses trauma for connection, they are not falling in love, they are falling backward into memory, into the psychic imprint of every moment they felt unseen and tried to earn being seen, into the echo of every parent they tried to heal by being perfect, into the endless search for the approval that never came. It is not chemistry, it is compulsion, a chemical addiction to unfinished emotional business, a spiritual hangover from a childhood spent decoding moods instead of discovering self. The empath calls it connection because their body remembers the charge. That familiar sparked the tension, the pull, the chaos. It feels like passion, but it's actually recognition of pain. The nervous system mistakes intensity for intimacy because it has never known peace without fear attached. It has never known love without performance. It has never known safety without silence. So the empath keeps finding the same soul in different faces, the same apology in different words, the same emptiness disguised as depth. And each time they tell themselves, this one feels different, because the storyline has changed, but the energy hasn't. And this is where Jung's wisdom slices through illusion like a blade. What you most need will be found where you least want to look. And for the empath, that means turning inward into the dark, uncomfortable truth that what they've been calling love was really survival. They were never addicted to people. They were addicted to the feeling of trying to fix them. They were addicted to the illusion of control that came with rescuing. They were addicted to the pain of almost being loved because almost was safer than unconditional. Almost was familiar, almost kept them needed. To truly awaken, the empath must confront the part of themselves that finds safety in suffering, that finds comfort in chaos, that confuses empathy with enmeshment, that confuses surrender with self-erasure, because love without boundaries is not love. It is servitude. And empathy without discernment is not compassion. It is self-betrayal dressed as virtue. The world tells empaths that they are special for their sensitivity, but sensitivity without self-awareness is self-destruction. The empath's gift is not in feeling everything. It is in knowing what not to carry. When you begin to heal, you start to feel the difference between resonance and repetition. You learn that peace is not boring, it's foreign. That calm is not disconnection, it's regulation. That love that doesn't hurt is not dull, it's healthy. But the empath, who has lived their entire life in emotional hypervigilance, will initially reject peace. They'll call it off. They'll say, something's missing, because the body, wired for chaos, doesn't know how to rest. It only knows how to repair. And so healing feels like loss of the spark, the chase, the constant analysis. But that loss is not emptiness. It is freedom. You see, when you stop mistaking trauma for connection, you start to see how much of your empathy was actually obligation, how much of your kindness was fear of rejection, how much of your openness was a survival strategy. You start to realize that half of what you called intuition was actually hypervigilance disguised as insight. This is where the real transformation begins. Because to evolve as an empath is to stop needing pain to feel alive. It is to stop romanticizing suffering. It is to stop chasing emotional highs that always crash into the same lows. It's not that you stop feeling, you feel more, but you no longer drown. You observe, you discern, you choose. You learn that compassion does not mean compliance, that you can care deeply without collapsing, that you can understand someone's wound without becoming their bandage. When that shift happens, your energy changes. You stop attracting the broken who feed on your healing. You stop magnetizing the chaotic who crave your calm. Because your frequency is no longer survival, it's sovereignty. The relationships that once consumed you start to fall away, not through conflict, but through misalignment. Because truth does not cling, it clarifies. And the empath who learns to say no to trauma bonds begins to glow differently. The light becomes sharper, the compassion becomes cleaner, the love becomes intentional. They no longer chase connection, they create it. They no longer interpret manipulation as depth, they see it as fear. They no longer confuse pity for love, they understand that both are born from imbalance. And that's when life starts to mirror back their healing. Because the universe does not send you what you want. It sends you what you are. When you are unhealed, it sends you lessons. When you are aware, it sends you mirrors. And when you are whole, it sends you peace, disguised as people. The empath who awakens becomes both healer and gatekeeper. Their love no longer leaks into the unready. Their empathy no longer enables the unaware. Their boundaries no longer feel cruel, they feel sacred. They stop trying to prove their goodness. They stop needing to be understood. They stop apologizing for their clarity. Because they understand now that not everyone who feels familiar is meant to be family. Some souls are not meant to stay, they are meant to show. Show you your blind spots, your patterns, your capacity to heal. They were never your destiny. They were your curriculum. And once you've learned the lesson, you no longer need the teacher. The pain that once pulled you under becomes your compass. You stop looking for love to save you and start living love as a state of being. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of integration, not denying the darkness, but absorbing it into consciousness. The empath doesn't stop feeling. They stop bleeding. They don't stop loving. They start choosing. They don't stop caring. They start discerning. And that discernment, that sacred intelligence of the soul, is what transforms empathy from a wound into wisdom. Because real love does not hurt. Real connection does not confuse. Real intimacy does not consume. Real love feels like truth, steady, grounded, free. It is not the adrenaline rush of trauma. It is the quiet recognition of alignment. And once you taste that, once your nervous system learns that safety is not absence of feeling, but presence of self, You will never again mistake pain for passion. You will never again chase those who drain you. You will never again call chaos love, because you will have remembered what love actually is. The frequency of truth meeting itself. The moment your soul stops trying to fix and starts trying to be, that is the liberation of the empath, the return to clarity, to calm, to consciousness. The realization that connection is not found through suffering. Connection is found through awareness. And in that awareness, you no longer attract pain disguised as love. You attract love that reflects peace. Because when the empath heals, the cycle ends. The trauma bonds dissolve. The karmic ties unspool. And what remains is you whole, awake, finally free. And in that freedom, in that impossible quiet, after decades of noise, you realize something sacred. You realize that what you always called love was never really love at all. It was longing. It was memory. It was your inner child begging the universe to replay the past until you finally got it right. But healing doesn't mean rewriting the story. It means walking out of it. It means looking at the same pattern that once seduced you, the same emotional familiarity that whispered, "This is home," and saying, "No, this is history." And that one moment of clarity, that one clean, silent no, becomes your spiritual awakening. Because once you can recognize the difference between connection and compulsion, the entire architecture of your life begins to rearrange itself. The same people, the same stories, the same emotional patterns can still appear, but you see them through new eyes. You no longer respond from wound. You respond from wisdom. You start to notice how trauma wears costumes. Sometimes it arrives as excitement, sometimes as destiny, sometimes as someone who seems to understand you better than anyone ever has. But now you know that understanding is not the same as alignment. And intensity is not the same as love. Intensity is what happens when two unhealed nervous systems try to merge. Love is what happens when two conscious souls choose to meet. The empath who has lived through this fire becomes fluent in energy. They feel the truth behind words. They sense intention before it is spoken. They no longer ask for honesty, they read vibration. It's not that they've become cynical, they've become sovereign. They know now that empathy without boundaries is an open invitation to be used. That compassion without discernment is how you lose yourself. So they begin to move differently. They pause before they answer. They breathe before they give. They observe before they attach. And this slow, deliberate way of living, this refusal to rush into intensity, becomes their power. Because to an unhealed empath, love feels like urgency. To a healed one, love feels like calm. They no longer crave adrenaline. They crave peace. They no longer seek to merge. They seek to coexist. They no longer chase completion. They embody it. This is the moment the empath evolves from healer to creator. They no longer see life as something happening to them. It's happening through them. They are no longer waiting to be chosen. They are choosing. They are no longer trying to prove worth, they are living it. This is what Jung called individuation, the birth of the true self, the integration of shadow and light, the unification of empathy and power. The empath's compassion is no longer codependent, it is creative. They stop saving others and start shaping reality. They understand that boundaries are not walls, they are architecture. They are the invisible design that allows love to flow without chaos. They are what makes peace sustainable. They are what transforms empathy from bleeding into building. And now, because the empath has finally healed their relationship with pain, they can finally receive love that isn't laced with it. They no longer need to earn affection. They allow it. They no longer need to chase intimacy. They radiate it. They no longer fear rejection. They understand that rejection is redirection from what is not aligned. When you reach this level of awareness, love stops being a battlefield. It becomes a mirror. Every person you meet now reflects a frequency within yourself. not the echo of your wounds, but the resonance of your wholeness. And that's when the world begins to feel different. The air feels lighter. The silence feels full. You start to realize that peace isn't empty, it's alive. It hums, it breathes, it pulses with clarity. You wake up one day and you no longer crave the storm. You crave the still water beneath it. You crave the kind of love that feels like coming home to yourself, not losing yourself in someone else. Because that's what true connection is. Presence without possession. It's two people who see each other clearly, without trying to fix, save, or fill. That kind of connection can only exist once you've burned through the illusions of trauma. Because trauma love is a magnet pulling you backward. Conscious love is gravity pulling you inward. And in that inward pull, you find what every empath was looking for all along: the source. The origin of all the love you try to give away. The infinite well that never runs dry. It was never in them, it was always in you. This is what Jung meant when he spoke of the self, not the ego that clings to validation, but the soul that knows it is whole. The empath, when fully awakened, becomes this self in motion, neither savior nor victim, but creator. They no longer look for mirrors, they become one. Not a mirror that reflects pain, but a mirror that reveals truth. Their energy speaks louder than their words ever could. Their silence becomes medicine. Their presence becomes permission for others to heal themselves. And here is the great irony. The same depth that once attracted the broken now attracts the awake. Because the empath has changed frequency. They are no longer broadcasting "save me" or "use me." They are broadcasting "I am." And everything that belongs to "I am," peace, purpose, clarity, love, begins to flow to them effortlessly, not as a reward, but as resonance. Because when you finally stop mistaking trauma for connection, life begins to show you what real connection feels like. It feels simple. It feels steady. It feels like truth. No fireworks. No anxiety. No waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just calm, presence, safety, the kind of love that doesn't spike your nervous system but synchronizes with your soul. And once you experience that, once you taste the difference between addiction and alignment, you never go back. You never again confuse longing for love. You never again chase what confuses you. You never again mistake a wound for a home, because you realize that home isn't found in someone else's arms. It's built in your own. This is the ultimate awakening of the empath: to love without losing, to give without emptying, to feel without fragmenting, to walk through the world as both ocean and anchor, deep enough to feel it all, strong enough to stay grounded through it. And when you live from that balance, that sacred intersection of heart and awareness, your life begins to feel like art. Every interaction becomes a brushstroke. Every boundary becomes a frame. Every moment of peace becomes the masterpiece you once thought you'd only find in others. You are no longer chasing connection. You are connection. You are no longer searching for the one who understands you. You are becoming the one who understands everything. And when others look into your eyes, they feel something ancient, something unthreatened, unhurried, unbroken. They feel truth. They feel love without the hunger. They feel peace without the performance. That is who you've become. The empath who no longer mistakes trauma for connection, because you have turned the wound into wisdom, and the pain into power, and the past into light. And now, when love arrives calm, consistent, kind, you do not run from it. You recognize it, because it finally feels like what it always should have felt like. You. And from that recognition, from that silent understanding that love was never something to find, but something to remember, a new kind of peace begins to root itself inside you. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. It doesn't come with the rush of infatuation or the ache of need. It comes like dawn, slow, certain, gentle, unstoppable. You no longer wake with the anxiety of losing someone. You no longer measure your worth by how deeply others feel for you. You no longer mistake intensity for intimacy or silence for rejection. You start to realize that real connection never asks you to abandon yourself to keep it alive. It doesn't drain you. It restores you, because the empath who has healed no longer vibrates at the frequency of lack. They no longer attract people who mirror their pain. They attract those who match their peace. The same sensitivity that once enslaved them now liberates them. They can sense truth beneath words, intention beneath action, and energy beneath appearance, not to absorb it, but to navigate it. They have learned the art of energetic discernment. They can stand in a storm and remain still. They can feel the world's suffering without drowning in it. They can love without losing balance, listen without losing center, care without carrying, because they finally understand that empathy is not absorption, it's awareness. Awareness is what transforms the empath's curse into their crown. They stop reacting to every vibration and start directing it. They realize that emotion is not an instruction, it's information. And they use that information consciously. They stop asking, why do I feel this? And start asking, what is this feeling asking me to see? This is the sacred shift from emotional reactivity to energetic mastery. It's when you stop living like an open wound and start living like a healer. Not the kind that sacrifices, but the kind that radiates. Because a healed empath doesn't heal others by saving them, they heal others by being a living example of wholeness. You become the evidence that peace is possible. You become the proof that sensitivity, when owned, is strength. You become the mirror that reflects the path back home, not through pity, but through presence. And in this new awareness, you start to see how unconscious the world really is. How much of what people call love is actually control. How much of what they call loyalty is actually fear. How much of what they call chemistry is actually shared trauma. And you stop taking it personally. You no longer need to correct them, fix them, or teach them. Because you understand that everyone awakens when they are ready and not a moment before. You walk differently now. Your silence carries authority. Your boundaries hum with calm certainty. You no longer explain, you simply exist, and that existence itself becomes the boundary. People feel it. They sense the shift in your field. Some are drawn closer, magnetized by the calm. Others pull away, unsettled by the reflection of their own noise. And you let both happen without resistance, because you finally learned that energy doesn't lie and truth doesn't chase. The ones who are meant for your light will rise to meet it. The ones who aren't will fall away, and both are blessings. This is what it means to transcend the trauma loop, to move from attraction by wound to connection by awareness. You stop orbiting around what hurt you. You start moving toward what heals you. You stop asking why they couldn't love you right. You start asking how you can love yourself better. And every time you answer that question, the world around you rearranges. Because energy always seeks coherence. When you become clear, everything unclear dissolves. When you become grounded, everything unstable falls away. When you become whole, everything fragmented either integrates or exits. It's not punishment. It's precision. It's the universe responding to your vibration in perfect mathematical alignment. So the empath begins to live a new kind of life, not one of avoidance, but of awareness. They no longer hide from their depth, but they no longer let it drown them either. They feel everything, but they choose what to keep. They listen deeply, but they don't lose themselves in the noise. Their sensitivity becomes intelligence. Their compassion becomes clarity. Their heart becomes both sanctuary and sword. And through this transformation, they begin to understand something profound. They were never meant to stop feeling. They were meant to learn how to feel without forgetting who they are. Because emotion is divine, but unintegrated emotion is enslavement. When you integrate it, when you feel it without fusing with it, you become powerful in ways the unhealed cannot comprehend. You stop being triggered by everything and start transmuting everything. You stop asking for closure and start embodying it. This is the birth of the conscious empath, the one who no longer mistakes trauma for connection, but truth for love. They don't search for belonging anymore. They are belonging. They don't chase purpose. They embody purpose. They don't wait for peace. They radiate peace. They become what Jung described as the self-realized, the union of opposites, the wholeness that contains both light and shadow without collapsing into either. They no longer resist the dark parts of themselves. They integrate them, and in doing so, they become unbreakable. Because what can the world take from someone who no longer fears their own depths? What can manipulation do to someone who no longer confuses guilt with love? What can trauma repeat in someone who no longer feels at home in pain? Nothing. You have become the embodiment of balance, the still center of the storm. And from that stillness, you move through life like a force of nature, unbothered, unmoved, unshakably aware. You know now that not every connection is sacred, that some bonds are built to test your boundaries, not to heal your heart, that some people enter your life to show you the difference between love and longing. That pain was never a punishment, it was an initiation. And so, when new energy enters your field, you don't rush to call it destiny. You observe, you feel, you allow it to reveal itself. Because connection built from awareness unfolds, it doesn't explode. It arrives steady, clear, effortless. And this time, your body doesn't brace for impact. It relaxes because it recognizes something it's never truly known before: safety. The kind of safety that doesn't ask you to shrink, the kind that expands with you, the kind that holds space for both your depth and your light. That's when you know you are no longer repeating the past. You are creating the future. The empath who once mistook trauma for connection now knows that connection is not meant to break you open, it's meant to help you grow. It's not meant to drain you, it's meant to anchor you. It's not meant to feel like survival, it's meant to feel like truth. And when you live from that truth, when you walk through the world with that kind of awareness, you no longer just survive your sensitivity, you master it. You become both the healer and the healed, the seeker and the found, the question and the answer. You have finally realized that every person who hurt you was not your curse, they were your mirror. Every heartbreak was not punishment, it was instruction. Every false connection was not failure, it was initiation. And all of it, every wound, every ache, every unhealed pattern led you here, to this peace, to this presence, to this knowing that you were never broken, just buried under your own empathy. Now you shine differently. You love differently. You live differently because you finally understand real connection was never found in the storm. It was found in the silence that came after, when you met yourself and realized you were the home you were always searching for. And in that final silence, in that breath between who you were and who you've become, you understand that this was never about losing people. It was about finding yourself. You no longer look for love in the familiar ache. You no longer confuse adrenaline with alignment. You no longer crave those who make you question your worth. Because your worth is no longer a question, it is a fact, carved into the fabric of your being. You are no longer the empath who bleeds to prove your goodness. You are the empath who heals through presence, not performance. You do not chase connection anymore. You attract resonance. You do not beg to be understood. You stand in understanding. You do not carry others to safety. You embody it. This is what Jung meant when he said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Because when you stop mistaking trauma for connection, you stop living as a reaction to your past. You stop loving through your wounds. You stop searching for home in places that only remind you of your exile. And you finally begin to live not as the caretaker of everyone else's story, but as the author of your own. The world will still call you too much. It will still test your silence. It will still try to pull you back into the rhythm of chaos that once defined you. But you will not return. Because once you have tasted peace, noise loses its appeal. Now your boundaries are not walls, they are light. They do not keep people out, they show them how to meet you. Your empathy is no longer a drain, it is direction. It no longer bends toward brokenness, it expands toward truth. You have become what few ever managed to be, both soft and strong, both open and grounded, both feeling and free. You've become the living proof that compassion without self-betrayal is possible, that depth does not have to equal pain, that love does not have to cost your peace. And when people meet you now, when they stand in your presence, they feel something ancient, something holy. They feel a calm they didn't know they were craving. They feel safety, not because you take their pain, but because you no longer fear your own. You have turned empathy into art. You have turned pain into purpose. You have turned trauma into truth. And from that truth, you will never again be fooled by the performance of love. You will never again romanticize what hurts. You will never again call anxiety connection. You will walk through the world with quiet certainty, your heart open, your energy sovereign, your presence undeniable. You will no longer orbit the unhealed. You will inspire them to rise, not through effort, but through example, because now you know what connection truly is. It's not the rush of recognition. It's not the pull of old pain. It's not the urge to fix, to prove, to be chosen. Connection is clarity. It's calm. It's truth meeting truth. It's love that asks for nothing but presence. It's peace that feels like home. And that is where you live now, not in the echo of the past, but in the wholeness of this moment. Because you have remembered what every empath must one day remember, that the love you spent years trying to give to others was never meant to save them. It was meant to awaken you. You are no longer searching for the one who completes you. You are the completion. You are no longer the reflection of pain. You are the embodiment of peace. You are no longer the echo of trauma. You are the sound of transcendence. And as you move through this world, calm, clear, and unconquerable, every step you take becomes a reminder that real connection does not burn you alive. It teaches you how to shine. And in that light, your light, the cycle ends. The wounds close. The story transforms. You are no longer the empath who mistakes trauma for connection. You are the consciousness that turns suffering into wisdom and wisdom into love. And that sacred stillness within you is the connection you were searching for all along.